Quarth is a game that's been on my radar for a little while. Seen some reviews on it, and it always looked like a game that would appeal to me, but it's just kind of been in the background. Since Frame compared it to Puzzle Link on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, I've been on the lookout for it. Last weekend, I finally picked it up at the retro store, and it's really fun. Now, you may be saying, you didn't just buy a rare arcade game, did you? And you'd be right. Quarth is most famously a Game Boy game. I'm not sure if anyone's taken note of this, but there's a handful of arcade games that seem to be more famous on the Game Boy. The first one that comes to mind is Kicks. It always seems to make a lot of the best Game Boy games lists, though I'm sure most arcade fans have played the original. One many might know is Avenging Spirit. That game is always touted as a Game Boy hidden gem or underrated game, but no, it was an arcade game first. And the thing about Quarth is that it's a game that doesn't make these lists, yet is still more remembered for its Game Boy iteration. But first, let's take a look at the even more forgotten arcade original. Developed by Konami, Quarth was released in Japanese and European arcades in 1989. Europe was cursed again with a worse name, Block Hole. Yeah, I get it's supposed to be a pun because you're in space and there are space blocks, but come on, Quarth is just a better name. You can't get more 80s arcade than an awesome sounding fake sci-fi word. This game is often described as Tetris plus Space Invaders. And yes, that does describe the game pretty well. The main mechanic is shooting up blocks to create rectangles, and the bigger the rectangle, more points. There are a bunch of obvious rectangles since there's only a certain number of shapes that appear, like this L block. You just shoot 4 in one spot to clear it. But the strategy of this game is finding creative ways to make larger rectangles. Believe me, it's a lot harder than it looks. The whole game is constant frantic thinking, and when the blocks are starting to close in on you, it may not look it, but it is tense. It reminds me a lot of arguably my favorite puzzle game, Magical Drop. The screen is closing in on you pretty fast, and it has the same critical thinking adrenaline to it. Quarth is rather hard at first. I had trouble clearing level 1. You only get 1 life, too. Levels are 2 parts and are divided by these specially colored blocks. Once cleared, you'll advance. When you do eventually get killed, there is a handy continue feature, so you can just marathon this one in MAME if you'd like. That's about it gameplay-wise. The music is alright. Not anything great, but I bet some people like it a lot more than me. Though after playing, I can't recall how any of it sounded. But something that I believe makes this game unique is its visual style. Instead of taking the generic, futuristic spaceship route, they went with this cool, early French sci-fi look. This game was definitely inspired by the work of Georges Méliès with all the little mechanical detail and terrifying moon faces. I think this is an underrated art style, and more works should try to explore this. I'd say the first thing that I think of is 2012's Hugo. If you haven't seen it yet, give it a watch. It's worth it. So remember how I said that in Europe it's called Block Hole? Well, they didn't just ruin the name over there. They also stripped this game's visuals of all charm and personality. You control a generic spaceship without any cool automated visuals and mechanical stuff. The title screen is no longer stylish. But hey, at least they kept the man on the moon. You can pick up Arcade Archives Block Hole on PS4 and Nintendo Switch. Don't worry, both versions are included. For $8, I'd say it's worth it. I've always found the pricing for the Arcade Archives series to be strange. Do you really think Naughty Boy is worth the same amount of money as King of Fighters 2002? Hamster does. And that leads us into Quarth's retro home ports, starting with one you might not expect, the MSX2. Well, if you're a retro Konami fan, you probably did expect this. They were big on the MSX. And this was one of their last games on the platform. It's not bad. I can't recommend it though unless you own an MSX2 because the 2 other ports are a lot more accessible. It's just a worse way to play the arcade game, and it's just easier to play the arcade game instead. Then there's the Famicom port. This did not come out in America or Europe. It strays a bit from the arcade release. For starters, it plays a lot slower. However, unlike Parodius from the last short, I don't see this as an issue. It creates a different Quarth experience rather than a bad one. The difficulty is fair and is tweaked a bit to better suit home play. You can adjust the speed and pick out the level. There also seem to be quite a few ways to play in 2-player, but I couldn't test them out. Finally, the Game Boy port. And as I said before, this is the most well-known iteration of the game. And for good reason. Puzzle games were huge on the Game Boy thanks to Tetris. Quarth was no doubt inspired by Tetris, so it only made sense to put this on Game Boy. This port takes what the Famicom version did right, and expands upon it. You can pick from a bunch of different ships. They are purely cosmetic and don't change the gameplay. Some look like your standard futuristic spaceship, the original Quarth ship is here, and others look unique. Famicom's level and speed system is back along with the addition of power-ups. When you create some relatively large rectangles, you'll get one. I can't say much else about this game other than it's arguably the best Quarth. This and the arcade version are similar, but it feels like they refined Quarth for the pick up and play aspect of a portable. The original, of course, is an arcade game, and that comes with quick games and high difficulty. Personally, I find that one to be more fun, but objectively, this one is far superior. My tastes are pretty wacky. Quarth got an enhanced Game Boy Color port in the second volume of the Konami GB collection. This is a series of compilations that colorized a handful of Konami's Game Boy titles. They weren't good colorizations, but they couldn't call it Quarth, could they? They also couldn't call it Block Hole either. No, this game has the incredible title of Block Game. Block Game. If by some miracle there was a new Quarth, how the hell could they make the title any worse than that? Just stick with the original. Since it's a Game Boy game, and not one that's even sought after, you can pick it up for a couple of bucks. I paid like, what, $4? And it was extremely worth it. Outside of Tetris, Puyo Puyo, Panel de Pon, Dr. Mario, and a handful of others, the majority of puzzle games stay under the radar and aren't talked about or played much these days. I recently got a WonderSwan Color, and Gunpei is another excellent game I will cover on this channel one day. I made this video to give Quarth some of the attention it deserves. You can't go wrong with any version, really, and the arcade releases on modern consoles. Plus, since both versions are super cheap, you have no excuse not to try it. Quarth is a unique game that has grabbed my attention, and I hope that you have some interest in trying it out. Stay tuned for more arcade goodness coming later this month. I'm Amiiben, and have a good night.